Imagine a crowd of thousands, packed shoulder to shoulder in a cobblestone square, their breath visible in the crisp morning air. The year is 1649, and the city of London is about to witness an execution that will echo through history. A man stands on a wooden scaffold, his hands bound, his face defiant. But what happens next isn't just an execution. It's a catastrophe that turns a public spectacle into a blood-soaked nightmare. How did a single moment ignite a riot that left the square drenched in chaos? And what secrets did this event bury beneath its violence? Stay with me because you're about to uncover a story that's been hidden in the shadows of history for centuries. Let's step back to the heart of England, where the air is thick with tension. King Charles I, a monarch who believed he ruled by divine right, has just lost a brutal civil war. His enemies, the parliamentarians led by Oliver Cromwell, have decided his fate: death by beheading. This isn't just any execution. It's the first time in England's history that a reigning king will face the axe. The crowd gathered in Whitehall isn't here for justice. They're here for a spectacle. Some cheer for the king's downfall, others weep for their monarch, and many are just curious, drawn by the promise of a historic moment. But no one expects what's coming. The morning is cold, January 30th, 1649. The scaffold is draped in black cloth, a grim stage for the day's events. Charles steps forward, wearing a simple white shirt and a velvet cloak, his expression calm but resolute. He's prepared to die as a martyr. He speaks to the crowd, his voice steady, proclaiming his innocence and his faith in God. But the square is restless. Shouts of "traitor" clash with cries of "God save the king." The executioner, masked and silent, sharpens his axe. The blade gleams in the weak winter light, a promise of finality. The tension is unbearable, like a taut rope ready to snap. Now let's pause and think about this moment. Imagine you're standing in that crowd, your heart pounding as you watch a king, someone you've been taught is chosen by God, face his end. What would you feel? Fear? Excitement? Anger? This isn't just a historical event. It's a human drama charged with emotion. The people here aren't just spectators. They're players in a story that's about to spiral out of control. And it's not just the king's life at stake, it's the future of England itself. As the executioner raises his axe, the crowd holds its breath. The blade falls, swift and clean. A collective gasp ripples through the square as Charles's head rolls across the scaffold. For a moment, there's silence, as if the world itself has stopped. Then chaos erupts. A group of royalist supporters, enraged by the sight, surges forward, shoving against the parliamentarian guards. "Murderers!" they scream, their voices raw with grief. The guards, outnumbered and caught off guard, draw their swords. What was meant to be a controlled execution turns into a battlefield. Let's picture the scene. The cobblestones are slick with mud and now streaked with blood. Men and women, once united in curiosity, are now divided by loyalty. A young baker loyal to the king hurls a stone at a guard, only to be struck down by a pike. A mother clutches her child, trying to flee, but the crowd is too dense, a churning sea of bodies. The guards, desperate to restore order, swing their weapons wildly, cutting down anyone in their path. The square, meant to be a place of justice, becomes a slaughterhouse. But how did it come to this? To understand, we need to go back a few years. England in the 1640s was a powder keg. The king's insistence on absolute power clashed with a parliament demanding reform. Taxes were crushing, religious divides were deepening, and the common people were caught in the middle. When civil war broke out in 1642, it wasn't just soldiers fighting, it was neighbor against neighbor, brother against brother. By 1649, the parliamentarians had won, but victory came at a cost. The country was fractured, and the decision to execute Charles was meant to be a bold statement. No one, not even a king, was above the law. Yet this statement was a gamble. Public executions were common in the 17th century, but killing a king was unprecedented. Cromwell and his allies knew they were walking a tightrope. They staged the execution in public to show strength, but they underestimated the crowd's volatility. Many in the square weren't hardened revolutionaries. They were ordinary people, shopkeepers, farmers, apprentices, who had grown up revering the monarchy. To them, Charles wasn't just a man. He was a symbol of stability in a world turned upside down. Let's zoom in on one person in that crowd, a fictional but plausible character named Thomas, a 25-year-old blacksmith from Southwark. Thomas isn't a royalist or a parliamentarian. He's just a man trying to feed his family. He's come to Whitehall out of curiosity, but as he watches the king's head fall, something shifts inside him. He remembers his father, a devout man who prayed for the king every Sunday. He feels a surge of anger, not just at the execution but at the years of war that have left his forge empty and his children hungry. When the crowd starts to push forward, Thomas is swept along, not because he wants to fight, but because he's caught in the tide of rage and despair. This is where the story takes a darker turn. The riot grows, fueled by grief, fear, and years of pent-up frustration. The guards, poorly trained and overwhelmed, panic. A musket shot rings out, whether intentional or accidental, no one knows, and a young boy falls, his blood pooling on the cobblestones. The crowd roars and the violence escalates. Knives are drawn, fists fly, and the square becomes a blur of motion and sound. By the time the sun sets, dozens are dead or wounded, their bodies trampled underfoot. Let's reflect on this for a moment. This wasn't just a botched execution, it was a tragedy born of division. The people in that square weren't monsters. They were human, driven by loyalty, fear, and desperation. And in their clash, they revealed something profound. When a society fractures, even a single moment can ignite a fire that consumes everything. This event, though often overshadowed by the king's execution itself, marked a turning point. It showed England and the world that the death of a king wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of a new, uncertain chapter. Now let's explore what happened next. The riot was eventually quelled, but at a cost. Cromwell's forces declared martial law in London, and the city was placed under curfew. The bodies were cleared from the square, but the scars remained. For the parliamentarians, the execution was a victory, but the bloodbath that followed tainted their triumph. Rumors spread that the riot was a divine judgment, a sign that God had not forsaken the monarchy. These whispers fueled royalist resistance, planting the seeds for the eventual restoration of the monarchy in 1660. But what about the people who were there? For someone like Thomas, the blacksmith, the day was a wound that never healed. He survived the riot, but he carried the memory of the boy who fell, the musket shot that echoed in his ears. He returned to his forge, but the world felt different, less certain, less safe. His story, though invented, echoes the real experiences of countless others who witnessed that day. Their voices are lost to history, but their pain shaped the years that followed. Let's consider the broader impact. The execution of Charles I and the chaos that ensued sent shockwaves across Europe. In France, the young Louis XIV took note, vowing never to let his own power slip. In the American colonies, still in their infancy, the event was a distant but potent reminder that even kings could fall. The bloodbath in Whitehall became a cautionary tale, a warning of what happens when power, loyalty, and desperation collide. As we dive deeper, let's think about the executioner himself. History doesn't name him definitively. Some say it was Richard Brandon, the common hangman, others claim it was a volunteer. Whoever he was, imagine his perspective. He's not a villain or a hero, just a man tasked with an unthinkable job. As he swings the axe, does he feel the weight of history? Does he hear the crowd's roar, or is he deafened by his own heartbeat? After the riot erupts, does he slip away, haunted by the blood on his hands? His story, though speculative, adds another layer to this tragedy, a reminder that even in moments of great change, the human cost is borne by individuals. Now let's talk about the square itself. Whitehall was no stranger to executions, but this one left a mark. 4 years afterward, locals claimed the cobblestones were stained, a ghostly reminder of the blood spilled. Superstition grew, and some said the spirits of the fallen lingered, their cries audible on cold January nights. These tales, though likely exaggerated, show how deeply the event scarred the city's psyche. It wasn't just a historical footnote, it was a wound in the collective memory. As we near the end of this story, let's reflect on what it means for us today. The bloodbath of 1649 isn't just a dusty page in a history book, It's a mirror. It shows us what happens when division festers, when leaders gamble with the public's trust, and when ordinary people are pushed to their breaking point. In our own time, we see echoes of this. Protests that turn violent, societies split by ideology, and moments that feel like tipping points. The lesson isn't that executions are bad or that revolutions are doomed. It's that change, even when necessary, comes at a cost. And that cost is often paid in blood. So, what can we take away from this? First, history isn't just about kings and battles. It's about people like Thomas, like the mother in the crowd, like the executioner. Their stories matter because they remind us of our shared humanity. Second, moments of crisis reveal who we are, not just as individuals but as a society. And finally, the past isn't dead. It's a guide, whispering warnings and wisdom if we're willing to listen. Before we wrap up, let's imagine standing in Whitehall today. The square is gone, replaced by modern streets, but the weight of that day lingers. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear the crowd, feel the chill of that January morning. This story isn't just about a king's death or a riot's chaos. It's about the fragility of order, the power of belief, and the price of change. It's a story that belongs to all of us. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a moment that felt like history unfolding? Maybe it was a protest, a speech, or even a personal turning point. Share it in the comments. I read every one, and I'm curious to know your story. If this video moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who loves history as much as you do. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Trust me, the next story is just as gripping. Speaking of what's next, our next video dives into another shocking moment in history, the queen who watched her son's execution. It's a tale of loyalty, betrayal, and heartbreak that you won't believe. See you there.